Let's go ahead and get the meeting started. Yeah, let's get the meeting started. So we're going to call this Budget Committee meeting to order per ORS 192-610 to 192-690 and ORS 192-650. This meeting is being recorded. Also, this meeting will be available. Is that true? Rachel, we're going to make this meeting available on the website after the recording gets completed. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that's correct. I believe after this meeting is completed, probably in the next few days, that'll be posted to the Clackamas Fire website.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I got my formalities here in order. We need to elect a budget committee chair. We need
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Normally, when you're recording, there's. Oh, I see. I was looking for where the little red button is. It says that we're recording. It's on.
It's up on the upper left. Yeah.
Well, see the upper right. I'm using my iPad because we have another meeting going on at the same time.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I understand. Been there, done that. I just want to make sure I've got my act together here. We need to elect a budget committee chair, and then we need to elect a budget committee recording secretary. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then a budget committee. Okay, and that's the only two positions that we need to nominate and elect. Correct? I don't want to miss something. So, okay.
Did you say you have your act together?
Me? I never do.
Is that a true statement?
No, I'm just trying to make sure that I get us at least aimed in the right direction. And
okay. Okay.
So,
okay. All right.
Take care of the formalities. So, first of all, I'd like to introduce the Budget Committee. We've got Thomas Joseph, Don Trotter, Jim Suring, Marilyn Wall, and me, Jay Cross, as the board members. And then the citizen members are Aaron Anderson, Charles Gala, William Gifford, Heidi Hicks, and Tim Powell. And I want to, first of all, start before we go any further. You guys, thank you so much once again for being part of the Clackamas Fire and what we're trying to do here with the Budget Committee. Obviously, we couldn't do this without you. And in this time of COVID and strange things happening in our world, and certainly with these Zoom meetings and the rest of the stuff, we definitely appreciate you and appreciate the fact that you're here and willing to take time out of your busy lives to participate in this very important process here at Clackamas Fire. So without any further ado, I want to open up for nominations for Budget Committee Chairperson. Do I hear any nominations for Budget Committee Chairperson?
I nominate Charles Gallia as Budget Committee Chairperson.
Okay, William Gifford nominates Budget Committee Chairperson. Do I hear a second? Any other nominations?
Second.
Oh, we need to, well, don't we have to take we need to take nominations first, right?
You have to have a nomination in a second, and then you can take other.
Okay, so, all right, so Marilyn seconds the nomination. And do I hear any other nominations for Budget Committee Chair? Any other nominations for Budget Committee Chairperson? And any other nominations for Budget Committee Chairperson? Okay, hearing none, then the nominations are closed for Budget Committee Chairperson.
I move that we appoint me by acclamation.
Okay.
You don't need a motion. All Jay has to do is say, since there are no further nominations, Charles is now chair.
Since there's no further nominations, Charles is now chair. So I will now pass the gavel to Charles to establish the next position.
All right. Well, thank you. The next position is the recording secretary. And I'll open nominations for the recording secretary.
You should explain what those responsibilities are. It's pretty slim.
Marilyn.
I would nominate Aaron Anderson.
I second that.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Without, all right, they'll close the nominations then, and without objection, Aaron Anderson as the recording secretary. And now we'll tell you what the responsibilities are.
Wait a minute.
That's an old trick. That's an old trick.
Okay. Next is the up is Fire Chief Nick Brown. So
All right.
with,
Sorry.
budget introduction and district orientation. There you are.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity to be standing before you today. And would like to just say thank you to the Clackamas Fire Board, as well as the members of the Budget Committee. I just want to thank you for your support, your dedication, and commitment to Clackamas Fire District number 1 and this year's budget review process. Your time and input are critical to the process, and it helps the fire district align our resources to best prioritize our expenditures while focusing on the delivering our highest quality of service. We're pleased to announce and present for the committee's consideration the fiscal 2021 proposed budget. Would you be able to throw up, Rachel, the slide deck?
Yes, and actually, I believe Christina, there you go. Christina's going to actually run the slides for us tonight.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, Christina, if you would go to the next slide, please. As we've already announced, the budget committee members, I don't know what's typical here. Do you guys give a brief update on who you are in a background, or do we just, you've already introduced yourselves and we move on? Okay, I'm getting a head shake from Marilyn. That's what we're gonna do. Next slide, please. Okay, we're gonna turn this back over to Christina for a short position description for the budget committee meeting.
Thank you, Chief Brown. This slide just kind of provides a brief position description for budget committee members. You should have also received an attachment in your email this afternoon that had the full description. But basically, under the Oregon Revised Statutes, the main duties for budget committee members are to receive the budget and the budget message, which you're doing tonight, provide an opportunity for the public to ask questions and provide input. And that's at some point during this meeting, we'll call for public comment or input, and that will meet that criteria as well. And then the third is to act on staff's requested budget. We're not expecting this to happen tonight because obviously we're presenting the budget and the budget message tonight. So you haven't had a chance to, to look over it very much yet. But we will be asking that you consider approving that either at the May 19th meeting or the 27th, kind of however this goes. And that would be to approve the proposed budget, approve the permanent tax rate of $2.4012 per thousand, and also approve the levy for bonded debt of $2,059,409.
Okay, thank you, Christina. So is there any way we can zoom in on that, Christina, that slide? Let me just see, maybe it's my screen. There you go, perfect. So as we go through each step, this is just the organizational chart, and there's some things I want you to focus on here when we start going through the divisions and who's assigned to those divisions. Is if you look underneath, like for example, the fire chief's office, 1215, that's the org code that would describe the fire chief's office. The board of directors would be 1430. Public affairs is 1210. So this is the basic organizational chart as we see it today. We have a strategic planning retreat for the fire district E-team next week, and you're likely going to see some slight deviation with this organizational chart that we'll be able to update you on next week. Next slide, please. Okay, the fire chief's division. Underneath the fire chief's division, there's the fire chief, myself. Let's back up one, please. The board of directors budget, the fire chief's office, public affairs, And the lead on the public affairs is Chief Brandon Paxton. And then emergency management, which is also overseen by Chief Brandon Paxton currently. Next slide. Business Services Division, which is Deputy Chief Doug Whiteley. Underneath Chief Whiteley is Support Services, which Division Chief Mike Carlson oversees. Fleet Services, Director Bill Bischoff oversees that. Logistics, Director Deanne Cordes. And Facilities Management is Director Scott Balance. Community Services, which is currently Division Chief Brian Stewart. The Fire Marshal's Office, which is Battalion Chief and Fire Marshal Sean Olson. IT, Information Technology, which is Director Oscar Hicks. Data Services, which is Director Shelby Hopkins. And then the Administration Division Chief is Josh Yerke. Underneath that's Human Resources with Director Trish Noble. And then Financial Services is Director Christina Day. Next slide, please, Christina. The Emergency Services Division. This is Emergency Medical Services, which is Division Chief Josh Santos. And underneath that division is the Wellness Services Department, which is overseen by Director Heather Goodrich. And then Community Medicine. And Operations is Division Chief Dan Mulick. He's on this meeting. This is his first public meeting as the Operations Chief for Clackamas Fire. 3 battalions. The North, South, and East Battalion, and then the Specialty and Technical Rescue. Volunteer Services, which is currently Battalion Chief Steve Dieters, who's also doubling as the training chief, while Chief Kinna is working operationally on the line for the next few months. But typically, Chief Kinna oversees training. And then Wildland Mitigation and the Ops Assistant, that is Battalion Chief Brent Olson. He oversees that program. Next slide, please. Okay, for year 2021 update, we're going to pass this over to Operations Chief Dan Mulick.
Good evening, committee members and members of the board. It's an absolute honor to be here today and to be able just to present some information on the reason we're all here, and that's responding to our communities and serving the public. Just a quick overview of 2020. We responded to almost 24,000 requests for emergency services and 15,000 medical responses, and almost 9,000 fire hazards and other responses, which would include anything from wires down to public assists. The medical responses are anything from an entry, like a low acuity medical call, to a multiple unit response medical call for an emergency. Just a brief summary of what we do here, call volume wise at District 1. Next slide, please. And this just kind of shows our trend over the last 4 full years of where we're trending with call volume. And that just the tall blue columns are EMS runs. You can see that the organization is typical in the fire service. The majority of the run volume is medical services. And the small orange columns are the fire responses. We're just around the 600 to 700 mark every year. And then the gray columns are going to be those miscellaneous calls for service, like I mentioned, that contribute to the wires down and the public assist and the service calls. So just a short 4-year picture snapshot of our organization and what we do call volume wise running out the door. So thank you. It's an honor to be here, and we can move on to the next one. Thank you.
There's no trend there at all, eh?
Well, you know, as you look at the call volume in our organization and where we move up, it's kind of like the stock market. It just, with the denser our population gets, the more it increases. And so as a trend, if we were to show the 10 to 20 year trend on a graph, you would absolutely see an uptick in that for sure. So that's normally where it goes. We normally don't run traditionally less calls. They seem to always increase as the population increases. And
what about as a percentage of the population?
Yeah, absolutely. And a trend of that is, as well as it has a lot to do with it has a lot to do in our area with the growth that we have as we move out east. It sometimes has a lot to do with like the wildfire responses or the natural disasters that happen, like the ice storms that can throw a peak in responses. There's always those trends, but just as a general statement, you can always just kind of see a trend upward in that. And so is the challenge with an organization as large as ours is how do we best service the public with an increased demand of call volume every year? And so this is just a huge factor to look at. And like I mentioned, the reason that we're all here is to service the public and to be able to meet the needs of the thousands of calls that come into our response area throughout the year.
Oh, one thing to add to that as well, Mr. Gifford, is over the years as the fire district has grown in service area, you will see a continued uptrend. But since our service area hasn't consistently been the same size over the last 20 plus years, it does make it difficult to reflect an actual increase based on a specific service area. As for instance, if we've had a full contract for service with Estacada several years ago, we had the legal integration of boring fire and so on and so forth going back historically.
Yeah, I understand that, Doug. The question that I have is maybe as a percentage of the population. That I think we need a better handle on that as a metric. Otherwise, these are just numbers that, I mean, they frankly don't mean a whole lot of thing except in comparison to each other. But if we're looking at a percentage over time, I would like to hope with better building materials, better building codes and so on, better general attitude towards health safety, that some of that as a percentage of the population, I would like to hope that it's going down if we're doing a good job.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, Mr. Gifford. I mentioned like the strategy on how we respond to some of these emergencies. We introduce like a concept like our community paramedic, like Chief Santos runs out of the EMS division, and where we can service the public and not necessarily be sending out a fire engine with 4 firefighters on it that's designed to fight fire. We have implemented a 2-person medic into 2 different battalions, in the North Battalion and the South Battalion, to help out with those calls, to keep our frontline apparatus, our firefighting apparatus available for calls. As a whole, I really understand looking at this that it's extremely off balance. We focus here in our organization with what we call a firefighting force in order to get there and have enough people to safely and effectively combat a fire emergency. And that's what a lot of our response force is built off of, is that. And then in addition, the system that we are in, we end up running a lot of these other calls because we're all paramedics. We have we call it ALS, we're advanced life support, out of every fire station that we respond out of. And so with that, we respond with every ambulance call that goes, for the most part, that goes down in the county. So that's why you see the kind of the unbalance there. And you think that in like 2020 with 700 fires roughly, if you look at the numbers, a structure fire event could last multiple hours and going into multiple work periods. And so to have an average of 2 a day in the organization is actually a tremendous challenge. And so that staggering of apparatus, how we staff our apparatus, and the response models that we deploy out of, we really focus on that. And then as well as getting into those lower acuity calls to service the taxpayers the best that we can. It's a really interesting question asking about that with the comparison with the population, because if you look in like busier areas with the downtown district, you definitely see spikes when people come to work, or a university district, you see spikes when the population increases. And we don't have that information present for you, but I would be very interested to grab that and be able to share it with the committee as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gifford.
Yeah, Mr. Gifford, not to belabor this too much further, but to kind of get to speak to your point a little bit further, the county is partnering with the fire agencies and the ambulance transport agencies this year to stand up a data dashboard. So electric real-time data dashboard that tracks all the calls that are taking place in Clackamas County, the response times, response compliance, and all kinds of things. And the goal is to tie those metrics back to the population. And so I think now the systems are getting so great and technology is getting so good, and we're a lot more collaborative, that I think we're going to see a lot more of what you're describing, because we're realizing what I think you're getting to is, what is the population size versus call volume doing to our county resources as a whole, not just our fire district. So I think this next year, hopefully this next year with this data dashboard that we're lifting, maybe we'll have some better
I look forward to that.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Josh.
So I have one follow-up question on that too, and in order to belabor it. Has there been a change in how these calls are coded or described? Because if I just look at 2019 and 2020, when I add the other and EMS together, they proportionately make up about the same amount. There's an increase in 2020 in the other category. So, and a reduction in the EMS numbers. So was there a change in how some of those calls were categorized?
Yeah, I'll dive into that question for you. The how we categorize the calls, like all the blue column or anything they're going to be like medically related. So as we code them in our chart, so anything that would be the acuity, like the lower acuity calls on a medical can be just a ground level fall, all the way up to a cardiac arrest or an overdose. And so the spectrum is quite broad when you get into that. And including that, you're going to have somebody who has a medical issue from a motor vehicle accident or something like that, where you have actually an actual patient. The other calls don't necessarily tie it to a patient. They tie it to all of the other reasons that the public would need our assistance. And that might be anywhere from literally just the like I said, the wires down, or if a wind event comes in that gives those little spikes where we're out running a bunch of calls in a short period of time. As far as the trend goes, ranging, dipping up or down a couple hundred, or in the, in this case from 2019 to 20, about 1,000 1,500 medical calls. That is a little bit of a twist, but for the size of our population, I don't really feel that that's a huge swing that would have been jeopardized by how something is coded. However, we're always looking at that and always looking for efficiencies. And so it's a very fair question. The dispatch center does a triage, and they go right down an algorithm of how a code gets dispatched and what units respond out of the fire stations. And so that system is countywide, and we're not the only player in that. All the departments in the county work off of the same procedure. So it's actually quite complicated when you get into it. Really what happens with us is that we have a say in how that works, but we're just one player in that conversation. Chief Santos, do you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think what you're looking at there, Mr. Gallia, is we have a charting platform change that we've done within the last year and change. With that, we comply with the National Fire Incident Records system and the National Medical System Records forms. And so some of those codes change within those charting systems. And when you change the platforms, the data is only as good as the data in, data out. So whatever the crew members are actually inputting for codes changes that data. And I think that's a little bit of a reflection of what you're seeing there as well.
Awesome. If there's not any more questions there, we'll go on ahead and move on. Thank you, Dan and Josh and great questions.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen.
Next slide, please. Okay, so as we look at each budget year, it brings its own set of unique challenges as we strive to provide each citizen with the most effective and cost-effective fire rescue, fire prevention, and emergency medical services. The fire district has to constantly balance the service needs and expectations of the community with the available amount of revenue. And as we went through this budget cycle in fiscal year 2021, significant time was spent developing processes and procedures to ensure that we're operating as efficiently and effectively and financially responsible as possible. And I want to give you just kind of a brief overview of 2021 and some of the successes, and then we're going to dive into some of the challenges that we've had. So some of the successes is we formed new partnerships, strategic partnerships with with some IGAs, Sandy Fire with one, Gladstone, Candy, and with the unfortunate side of losing one with Estacada. We've had some successes with accreditation. Our grant awards, we continually are seeking opportunities for funding, alternative funding sources, and we received $340,000 in grants this year. Our wildfire mobilization, we were deployed multiple times through Oregon State Fire Marshal's office for this throughout the summer for wildfire events. And then obviously we had the one in our backyard in September that stretched us and challenged us. But through those wildfire mobilizations, the fire district brought in roughly $2 million back to the fire district. COVID-19 response, we answered the call with COVID-19. We had a lot of grants that we sought after, and we got reimbursements for about $434,000. While I'm showing you these numbers, they're successes, but they're also some of the challenges as well, because it just didn't cover all the costs. And then we recruiting and retaining the employees that we had, and various promotions. So those were some of the successes that we had, as well as answering the call that our public needed. As we dive into the challenges that Clackamas Fire hit, the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic is one that kind of stretched us all. As this incident started, we didn't exactly know if this was going to be a 1-month event, 6-week event, or we're going on a year plus at this time. And so, earlier on throughout the pandemic, our top priority was always the health and safety and well-being of our personnel in the communities that we serve. Our normal operations, they've changed significantly as we continue to plan for and respond to the worldwide disease in our community. The big challenge for us was PPE, getting the right amount of PPE, and then the increased costs of PPE. But through the support staff and logistics, our PPE, we have an adequate stockpile, and it's critically important to protect our first responders. We're working hard to ensure that we have the needed equipment to keep our responders safe, but that costs money. The next piece that I'd like to speak to is the 2020 wildfires. I think as an organization, you look to California and you see these kind of events in California, and I think that there was a little complacency that this was going to happen in our backyard, and so this stretched us. We learned a lot, but this significantly impacted not only the fire district and the firefighters, but most importantly our communities. We have members of the community that lost their homes. There were some relationships that and a breakdown in trust of their fire department, and the property loss and fiscal impact truly remain a concern to the fire district moving forward. And as we look at projections and long range forecasts, we're looking at what this season's going to bring forward. And in my time with Clackamas Fire, it's rare to see this area being labeled as moderate risk. We're typically low, but the forecasts this year are showing a moderate risk to the Portland metro area, and then high risk throughout Oregon. So inevitably, we're forecasting and looking that this could be another busy season for wildfire, which is going to stretch resources across the state, and it's going to stretch our own resources in our current district and in our backyard. The next piece to this, to tie back into what I was talking about initially with the challenges and the lessons learned from the wildfires, and utilizing some of the resources that we have in the public and the brilliant minds and relationships that we were able to develop post wildfires, and finding new strategic ways to be able to answer the call in the event that this happens again, and fix some of the systems that we have that we're suffering. And number one is our communications, and so getting our communications back up to where they need to be. BK radios and getting standardized VHF within every single apparatus has been a big focus for us because without communications, we run big risk to our firefighters. As you dive into proper PPE for wildfire and aligning contracts for the heavy machinery and helicopters and forming strategic partnerships. All of these bring a fiscal impact to the fire district as we prepare for the upcoming season, and that we better prepare ourselves for better serving the citizens of Clackamas Fire. The next challenge for us is identifying innovative operating models to meet the growing demands for service. The fire department has become just kind of if you don't know what to do, 911, you call 911, you get the fire service, whether it's a broken pipe in the front yard, a broken pipe in the house where you would normally think that somebody would call a plumber. The fire department gets called quite often for calls of that nature. Smoke and nuisance complaints, down power lines, things of that nature. We have a vast majority of diverse calls that we respond to. And so identifying the innovative and creative ways to respond to these is definitely a challenge as we move forward. As we are growing and as we have an increased need for service, that increases our operating costs, and things aren't getting cheaper. They're only getting more expensive. We've had big impacts on revenue streams. Urban renewal is one, and we constantly are having funding streams back to that should be coming to the fire district are being diverted for urban renewal. And while that's great for the communities, we love that. As urban renewal is utilized in some of these communities, the demands and increase for services are required, but yet the funding that would normally come back to the fire district to help in that growth is being streamlined to urban renewals. And that poses a big threat for us moving forward as a fire district. And not to call out the elephant in the room, but I'm going to, is the exit of Estacada with the termination of contract. That's a big shock to not only the citizens of Estacada, but the citizens of Clackamas Fire and the fire district as a whole. That was a revenue source that was brought in to Clackamas Fire, and with that revenue service now being terminated, we have about a $1.4 million deficit from that in personnel costs because we've kept the Estacada employees, and so we are having to get creative with ways within our budget so that we can maintain those employees while keeping them until we have attrition within the fire district so that it balances out. And so for the next 12 to 18 months, that's a focus with our personnel that came over from the Estacada merger, Estacada contract for service and failed merger. Next slide.
Chief,
yes,
do you
yes,
have
sir.
Just a little space for a question on that?
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I know you guys know this information so well, but for us that are trying to digest it, we need to swallow once in a while.
Yes, sir.
The concern that I had about the Estacada issue is my only strength is strategy. So I'm always thinking, what's the next thing we could do? And is there an opportunity for another vote? Is there an opportunity to put this back on the ballot? Or do we just throw up our hands and say, oh, well, that's the way it is? And what's being done in that regard?
I would love that. I would love that opportunity.
Let's do it.
Well, I would. The reality of it is the citizens of Estacada have been vocal, and what they would like to do is start their own fire department back. And so Estacada board has gone in the process, and they're in the process of hiring their own fire chief. And starting up a new fire department starting July 1. There's a lot of excitement about that in the town and city of Estacada. And I think that's what the citizens want. If the citizens wanted an opportunity with Clackamas Fire, I would love and welcome that opportunity to win the trust back that was lost from them.
Right. Well, no sense crying over spilt milk. I'm sorry that we didn't have a more aggressive campaign in Estacada for that. The question remains then, if we have to just kind of accept that, is Estacada willing to take back their firefighters?
So Estacada, the firefighters were offered, and it was part of the IGA, or sorry,
Yeah.
part of the contract.
I understand.
And the firefighters chose to stay with Clackamas Fire. They did not want to go back to Estacada. And so with that, it has created the environment to where we have the 10 new employees that are part of the Clackamas Fire family.
Yeah, and that's fine. It's a good family to be a part of. I would think that there'd be a message that we could give to the citizens of Estacada saying, listen, your own firefighters don't want to be there.
Yes, and we shared that. We shared that with the board, and I believe that message in a public meeting that was, we did our due diligence on our end to follow the contract as it was laid out, William. And so,
well, it's always good to follow a contract.
Yeah, you got to do that, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Or find a good loophole. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll be thinking about this.
Nick.
More.
Hey, William.
Yes.
Oh, this is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
If I could just follow up, as a director, I'm one of the members that's on the interagency committee. I was heavily involved in the election and all of the committee work. And I'll have to say, a lot of people worked really hard on the election on both sides. Our personnel, the career and the volunteer members that were active on those fires did absolutely outstanding work. And following the wildfire event, I think because of some poor decisions that were made by certain members in the leadership, I think led to the PR snowball effect. And it happened quick, it happened fast, and we were all kind of just caught up in it. The Estacada directors were getting a lot of feedback and negativity from their citizens that happened very quick. We, as directors, got a lot of feedback from our own firefighters, including our union, who sent us a letter that said our firefighters are getting yelled at in the grocery store and every time they go on a call. So it was very complicated. It happened quick. And does this make sense? We did a feasibility study and spent $50,000, and everything we're doing, every decision that is being made is totally contradictory and opposite of anything we've ever done before. Does it make sense? No. Does it make sense economically? No. Is it the best service for their citizens? No. Is it the best for ours? No. But it just kind of happened, and I think the reset needed to happen. It's very unfortunate, but we've every consolidation effort and everything we've done in our past history for the 11 or 12 departments we are now, they didn't all go smooth. We never had a failed election, but we had a lot of things happen for years and years that could have failed elections. So I think it was one of these resets that it happened, and hopefully the doors, we had a interagency committee meeting just yesterday or the day before with Estacada's directors, and they may be asking for some help in an area or two. So I think those doors are still open. We still have a good relationship and partnership with them. And that's really, I just wanted to explain that.
Yeah, Jim, I appreciate the explanation. And I'm not, and I do not look at that explanation as excuses. I'm sure that you all tried the hardest that you can. I like to look forward and think, is there an opportunity where this could still turn around, if it's not for another 2 years, 3 years, but or are we going to abandon that entirely?
Oh, I think we're always open to anything. And I absolutely think that what could it lead to in the future? endless possibilities, really, in my
Good
opinion.
attitude. Good attitude. We'll talk
Yeah.
more. Thanks, Jim.
And Thomas, I think you wanted to say something too.
But, besides the Estacada situations, William, for the citizens of the budget committee, we are impacted by almost $1.2 million every year by urban renewal districts, and just keep going. We increased demand for service and decreased revenue. How do we compensate that? So that's what something that is alarming to me, that we cannot discount an area because they are in the urban renewal districts. We have to provide the same service. So that's a concern to me too.
I'm not seeing the connection, Thomas, between
The
Estacada
budget,
and,
the budget.
oh, the budget, of course, yeah, but that's not, but Estacada is not an urban renewal district.
No, it has nothing to do with I'm talking about part of the budget that we are impacting.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And Nick, can you take us back to the
Yeah.
current slide?
Thank you so much, Charles. Christina, would you go back one slide, please? Thank you so much. There is one point on here that we're going to touch on later, but it's truly been a challenge this current fiscal and is going to be a challenge next fiscal that I'm just going to touch on right here, unless anybody has any questions, because I did run through a lot of information there with those challenges before I move on to this final challenge. Okay, so the final challenge that we currently have is our medical bills, insurance that we have within the fire district. Last fiscal year, we budgeted about $1.6 million under what we're trending as far as our medical payments, and so that's creating a pretty big problem for us as an organization. And as we forecast to next year, there's really two tracks you could go. You could budget for what the 80% is which it's commonly been over the past since we went to this new model of medical insurance, self-insured medical insurance in 2010, or we budget at where we currently sit. And so what we decided to do was take a conservative approach and budget what the numbers are this year. There's a lot of information that shows it could be a spike year, but I'm not going to bank on it being a spike year and have smoke and mirrors. And so what you see in front of you this upcoming fiscal is going to be a $5.7 million medical premium, which is what we're trending currently. And so I do not want to bring forward to the citizens or to my board of directors a 4.1 and then have us be in the same exact position we're in this year, where we're sitting at 5.7 and upside down $1.6 million. So that's a big challenge for us during fiscal 2021. Was that spike year in medical insurance, and it's a concern for us moving forward next year. Is there any questions with the medical insurance piece?
Hey, Nick.
Yes, sir.
This is Jim. So 5.7 to 4.1, that's a huge upside down deficit.
Correct.
Whose decision was that? Was that the chief's decision? Was that the health insurance committee that helps make that recommendation?
No.
Or just curious, who actually decides that?
Yeah, the recommendation from the committee actually came in at that $5.7 million range. And I was not a part of those conversations, but as if Chief Charlton was sitting right here with me, he would do the same thing. So it all comes on me. It all comes on the fire chief, a decision like that. The budget rests in the fire chiefs. So the fire chief's responsible for this. What my actions taking forward to you from here is that's on me. So any decisions made from years previously, if Chief Charlton was standing right here, he would say the same thing. So the fire chief makes the decision on where we sit budget was.
Okay, well, I agree with your outlook, though. It's more realistic, but yeah, that previous decision sounds like it was a poor one. But thank you for answering that.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. And we'll turn this time over to Christina to give us a review of the current fiscal year, which she'll be able to dive into that a little bit.
All right, thank you, Chief Brown. This table just kind of shows where we're estimated to end the current fiscal year. And of course, we need to determine this so that we know where we're going to start next fiscal year in the proposed budget. You'll notice that these numbers are different from the document that you may have had a chance to read yet or not. We did get some updated information just yesterday, actually, about our expenditure trends and everything. So these numbers aren't going to match. Actually, this one won't be in this table won't be in your book, but that projected ending fund balance is the beginning fund balance in the FY22 book. And that number is going to be different based on the changes we received yesterday. So just kind of going over these, personnel services is obviously a high, a portion of our budget already. And a lot of this overage is driven by those health insurance claims costs that Chief Brown was talking about. Materials and services is, we've kind of, we've set a $7 million cap and are going to work with staff and find ways to keep our materials and services as close to that as we can, rather than, just spending it out. Let's see, capital outlay is budgeted in other funds, and we'll get to those later on in the presentation. The debt service, that is a given, and the transfers out, that's just a little bit of money going between funds to based on surplus sales and that type of thing. So as far as revenue at the bottom, of course, our beginning fund balance for the current fiscal year, FY21, was 18.2 million. Property tax revenues are coming in slightly lower than anticipated, and that is because the prior year taxes are not collecting to the level that they have been in past years. They're about half. Our current year taxes are coming in right on target, but it's those prior year taxes that we're still collecting that are coming in slower. And then the other revenues and transfers in, we've just had a lot of changes. In fact, one of those changes for the current year is some reimbursements for those health claims. So go over that a little bit. So right now we're looking at a actual ending fund balance of 17.7 million. The proposed budget says 18.5. So we'll be addressing that difference as well. And as far as our fund balance, we're basically spending our fund balance into our fund balance by $519,000. If all of this trends and everything hold true.
Christina, can I jump in here just for a second? Okay, so what are we doing? So currently about 8 million is in materials and services for this current fiscal. We're trying to curb that down and cut spending to trim down to about 7. Stuff to operate as a fire district for utilities, fuel, those things. But we're trying to trim down to things that just are able to service the apparatus responding to calls. So that's a strategy that we are currently in to try to mitigate that sink into the ending fund balance. The other piece with this that I want to point out is with the wildfires, with COVID, with the ice storm, if you notice right there at our personnel services being up about 5% from what was budgeted, that's a big chunk of that has to do with that. We had basically 3 natural disasters that hit us this year. And typically that's what a contingency is for. But then if you throw the 3 natural disasters and the medical benefit, not budgeting for the medical benefits that we had, that we needed, it throws us into a pretty sticky situation currently. And that's why you see that $519,000 into the ending fund balance. We've done a lot of hard work to try to mitigate and read and react to what we faced. But to be quite honest, I don't think any of us thought we were going to hit 3 natural disasters this year.
No.
Oh, sorry, William.
Yeah, excuse me. For Christina, I want to focus just a little bit on the property tax revenues, because I mean, we don't have any control over the beginning fund balance, and other revenues transfers in. The property tax revenues, you said something about this year's are coming in okay, but last year's are a little sluggish.
Yes.
So sluggish doesn't mean it's stopped completely, though.
No.
There's a lot of people that haven't been able to pay their taxes because they've been laid off work or whatever the situation was. But we expect that will be paid, right?
Eventually,
I mean,
yes.
Yeah, there's no way of getting out of those taxes.
No.
Somewhere, you know, even if it was a foreclosure, I think you taught me this last year. God forbid anybody lost their house to a foreclosure, but the bank would pay those taxes.
Yeah.
So that's still money in the bank we're going to get one way or another.
Eventually, yes. It's just a matter of timing.
Of course, isn't it all?
Yes. And also, last tax year, Clackamas County Assessor's Office really did a push on collections of prior year taxes. So we had quite a bit more last year, I think it was $500,000 at least, more than typical last year. So it kind of feels this year like it's going back down a little, but it's down even farther than it would have been. So,
and I imagine it's not really PC for them right now to be as aggressive as they had been in the past, considering the economy.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this? We'll keep talking a little bit more about it as well. So moving on here, just kind of a breakdown of the projected ending fund balance. Chief, did you want to take this one, or you kind of talked about it already?
We touched on this. Why don't you just touch on the areas that I didn't touch on, Christina, as far as unspent contingency.
So in the current year's budget, fiscal year 21, we budgeted to have an ending fund balance of right about $17 million and to not spend our contingency of $2.5 million. So together with those, we budgeted to end the fiscal year at about $19.6 million in fund balance. The projected fund balance is actually 17.7 instead, and that's because of those overages in the different categories, about almost $2 million. So that's why we're projecting our ending fund balance to actually decrease by that much in the current fiscal year. And here's some of those major factors down here. The wildfire expenses and COVID expenses, as the chief mentioned. That spike in health insurance claims is about $2.3 million. And that, we still have a couple months left out of this fiscal year to book for that. That one is a bit of a concern.
Christina, can I jump in right there?
Sure.
So that is what's projected right now. We have a meeting with the LBG next week because we are in stop loss to figure out what that's our projections. So we need to figure out exactly what that is. What we know for sure is that we're at that 1.6 and we're projecting at that 2.3. So we need to lock in what that rate is. And so that's why you're seeing that $2.3 million, but we are in the stop loss. What's the proper terminology, Christina? Aggregate portion?
Oh yeah, That's what
of our medical claim agreement. So
sorry, Chief Brown, I was just going to chime in that for individual claims, I think it's 75,000 for individuals, and above that, that's the stop loss dollar amount. And then in aggregate for the collective, it's 5 million. So next week's goal will be to lock down what that 5 million really represents, because we're over it. And those may be different calendar years that some of those claims are on. So maybe it's not literally every dollar over 5 million, but we'll be locking that down, like Chief Brown said. So
yeah, so we should be able to have an update with that to this committee next week. And then, you know, as Christina mentioned, and this isn't something that I brought up on the earlier slide, is the audit adjustment from 2019. And so let's go 3 wildfire, let's go 3 natural disasters, let's go the medical benefits, and then an audit error from 2019 that hit us this year at $1.2 million. And so if you add that all together, this is what you're seeing here is a pit full of mud that we're swimming through until we can get clear. And I was going to hit on this a little bit later, but as we move forward, the fire district is looking at multiple levels at which we can shore up our mentality as far as how we spend. We've started some workforce reduction currently, and we are trying to mitigate this impact that we are facing. So we can go on to that next slide, Christina.
Aaron, did you have a question?
I do, and this is for the chief and for Christina, perhaps either or of you. I'm kind of focused on the 2.3 and how we got to that spike in health insurance claims. And I'm curious, how did we miss the mark so far? This may have already been answered. I don't know. Is that because of people being out with COVID and a 14-day quarantine period required and overtime to cover that, or how did we miss that mark so much?
Yeah, I think we've had some family members within Clackamas Fire have some pretty significant medical problems that that you can't account for.
Okay.
Right. And anytime something like that happens, not only does it impact the organization emotionally and the families emotionally, but you know, you never want to plan and say that somebody's going to get a disease or anything of that nature. But it didn't just impact us with one. It's been multiple family members have some pretty catastrophic things happen. So
I'd like to also explore that, but I think it would take too much time for the budget discussions. Because I frankly would really like to understand the status of self-insurance and the stop loss kick-in, because it sounds like you might have an unusual arrangement with the reinsurance that you have. So, but that's a lengthy, complicated discussion. So maybe you could either push it off to a micro meeting at some future point.
Yeah, I'd love that, Charles. I'd love that.
Okay.
Chief, I had misspoke on that individual stop loss. It's 125, so 125,000. So I apologize for that.
Your money. We've had a lot of numbers back and forth over the last 8 weeks. So
thanks.
Okay, can we move on to that next slide, please?
Okay.
So this is you moving forward, and we've kind of given you a little bit of what we're going to be facing. Okay, Christine.
Okay, so just going through the budget assumptions that we used in preparing the fiscal year 22 budget. Of course, our permanent rate hasn't changed. The assessed value growth, we are actually using 4% this year. It's a little bit lower than we've used in previous years, but just due to some of the uncertainty with, you know, COVID and property values and that type of thing, we're actually going with the estimate from Clackamas County at the top end of their estimate, which is the 4%. And again, each quarter percent in AV growth is about $146,000. So even if this ends up being, 4.5% AV growth, that'll add another, not quite $300,000 in revenues. Tax collection rate is remaining at 95.5%. And each quarter percent that moves is valued at about 156,000. And that one moves a lot more and a lot faster than the AV growth. And again, that's one that this year we're just not sure how that's going to go. Like we were talking about earlier, we may not collect all the taxes in this fiscal year that we're expecting. We will collect them eventually, but it's kind of a matter of timing about that as well.
When you mentioned that growth is estimated by Clackamas County, are you talking about the tax assessor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they send us a letter each year saying, here's what we estimate the AV growth to be within the county. So, yeah.
Christina, can I just dive in just for a second there? And William, as we discussed this as a team, I think it would be irresponsible of us to with everything that we've faced, to budget at that 4.6.
Oh, yes.
And be wrong, right? And so that's why with everything that we're facing, it was that 4% felt right. Gosh dang it! I hope we come in at 5.5 or 6, right?
But I understood. Yeah, no, I think I much prefer to be conservative.
Yeah, it's the right route to go. Thank you.
And again, while more money is always better, each quarter percent is 146,000. So if we got a 0.5% more, $300,000 unfortunately isn't going to flip this around in 1 year. So the total on urban renewal taxes diverted is 1.4 million for FY22. It's estimated at 1.4 million. And I've got a chart that shows the cumulative a little bit later on here as well. Okay, so our carry forward estimate, here's where you see this budgeted carry forward balance. That's the ending fund balance from fiscal year 21 we talked about earlier at 17.7 million. As far as estimated cash needs between July 1 and November 15th, our average expenditures in a month are $4.5 to $5 million. We've done a really good job over the last couple of years of pushing out those purchases until we actually receive our check for taxes on November 15th. So that's how we've been managing that in the past. We came pretty close this past year to needing to issue tax anticipation notes. Just, we weren't sure with the wildfires going on and everything, how much that was going to cost. So we were set to issue them, but ended up not needing to after all, which is great. I really think at 17.7, you're probably going to need to just plan on it for this coming year. Definitely have it in place as a backup. We've had as little as 18.2 to roll forward in a fiscal year, and we've, made it to November 15th with that. So it's definitely a possibility that, with a lot of, tightened spending, I guess, we could do it with the 17.7, but I would really advise having the tax anticipation notes ready to go just in case. And then, the managing spending, as we've talked about, and we do that year round, but particularly in this July to November period. A lot of the annual agreements that we have and service contracts, our folks have been able to either break down to pay quarterly so that we're not paying the entire $100,000 bill, July 2nd. We're only paying half of it, or, maybe it's every 6 months or something. So that has helped with kind of the cash flow during that period as well. All right. So before we get into kind of the big spreadsheet, the all funds summary, I wanted to go over a couple of terms here just to make sure that everybody is clear on the definitions of a balanced budget versus deficit spending, because I feel like sometimes I say both of these things and you know, I want to make sure that you guys understand how I'm using that language when I talk about those. So a balanced budget, all that means is that your resources equal your requirements. So that's beginning fund balance plus revenues, and that has to equal expenditures plus your ending fund balance. And that is a requirement of the Oregon administrative rules. So when we look at our budget, if our expenses are more than our revenues, then we're deficit spending because we're spending more than we're bringing in that fiscal year. And in order to balance that, to balance the budget like we're required to, we have to decrease the fund balance reserves. So that's why we're saying we're going to come in at you know, a lower amount we're spending into our fund balance this year. And this year, you can tell, you know, 66 million is our expenses and 64 is our revenue. Got the total of that on the next page. Our deficit is about $1.4 million, our deficit spending. That doesn't mean that the budget doesn't still balance. It just means that we're carrying forward. We will be carrying forward less in FY23. So,
isn't that what it's for?
Pardon?
Isn't that what it's for? I mean, it's not the best situation, but we have that buffer just because of situations like this.
We do, and the only, well, not the only, but a big problem with this is that we need to be sure to carry forward enough to fund our operations from July 1 to November 15th. And because of the deficit spending, we're getting into a place where that is probably not going to happen over the next couple years. I hope not that long, but yeah, so I mean, really that reserve has a purpose, and we do use it every year to fund our operations until our taxes come in. So it's not just like a savings account sitting out there that never gets used or touched. It definitely has a purpose. So
Christina, can I just jump in there? Because William, that's a great question. You know, and as I look at it in trying to take a fiscally conservative approach, which is what we've always done, the TAN game isn't a game that the fire district wants to get into as far as a constant source of making it to November 15th, because then we're taking a credit card to pay off debt, basically, right? Now, granted, rates are low right now, and from years past, that impact is a little bit less. It's just not a direction the fire district wants to go or will go moving forward. That's my job to come in. And as Christina's leaving, and we appreciate her and are so excited for her in the next chapter of her life, we've really put out a nationwide search to find who's going to replace Christina, and we've hired a CFO that is going through the background checks, and so I'm going to wait until we announce who that is, until that's official, and I'm excited about. I'm super excited about, and we're going to form a strategy for the next 12 to 18 months that's going to get us back to where we are, where we need to be financially. Because the truth be told, William, is, and you know this just as well as I do, as we are expanding services, there's a lot of things coming. We need to be better prepared in a lot of areas. We need to start looking at upstaffing apparatus. We need to look at getting more strategic apparatus that are dual functioned to where we're meeting the needs of the community, and getting creative and innovative, and setting ourselves up for the next not only 1, 2, and 3 years, but 10, 15, 30 years down the road.
Now you're talking.
So,
yeah.
So that is what you can expect for us moving forward, and this administration moving forward. a lot of brilliant, great team that I've been fortunate to be around, and that is our focus moving forward. It's just going to take us a little bit of time to get our bearings, rewire our mindset, and get us to where we need to be.
It'll happen.
So I have a couple of things. One is I don't have an end time on the meeting. That's practically speaking.
Signy guy.
Yeah, well, let's hope not. And I don't know what the consensus would be around establishing that at, say, we're at 7-Eleven now at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. Is there a preference? Let's say 8.
Yeah, we got 3 days to do this. I'd like to shut this off at 8.
Okay, so let's all right, then let's shut it at 8. And then and you may be getting, this is actually a question related to the budget, and that is, given the general bond market rates and is there any capital bonds that you are considering refinancing, or have discussed that?
Yeah, that's it's funny you bring that up. Our meeting this Monday, we were talking about muni bonds and the rates that those are currently, and looking at what our current debt is with that loan, and seeing if it makes sense to try to reallocate that. I just want to get that CFO in and not put that burden on Christina as she's transitioning out. So
okay,
it's a great question, and it was a topic that we talked about on Monday. So thank you.
Charles, real quick, Jay here. So, being as though this is Chief Brown's first budget round that he's had to go through, and he's up against some significant challenges with this budget and probably the next 2 budgets afterwards, I would like, if possible, even if we go after 8, is for him to at least deliver his introduction into the budget meeting, or into the budget, this year's budget, even if it goes a few minutes past 8, because he does have some important things to share with us, and then we can have an opportunity to digest all of this information before our next meeting. So I don't want to cut him off if we don't have to. I think we should give him the respect to do whatever it takes to get through this presentation. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree.
Thank you. I'll shut my trap a little bit so that we can get going though.
I'll try to speed it up a little here too. Stop me though if you need to. Jim had a question.
I just wanted to make a quick statement. I appreciate all of the information that you're presenting. As I'm looking at these slides, deficit spending and by millions, and I think it needs to be stated that as a director, we meet every month. And for some reason, this seems to be the first time to me, and I haven't missed anything. I'm at every meeting. This is the first time that we've heard that the medical was so underfunded. It's the first time that we've heard a lot of this. It seems like the lack of communication, perhaps, that's gone on, kind of snuck up on us, and all of a sudden here we are. I guess I'm somewhat taken back by a lot of this, but what I do appreciate is Chief Brown, you're making us aware of it now. You're being transparent and getting ahead of that, and I do very much appreciate that. So as we work together to figure this out, I just thought that needed to be stated.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to add that last month we were thinking it would be $1 million over budget, and then some of the information we just received yesterday added another $1.5 million to that. So it's not been known to us for long either. Unfortunately, it's been quite a shock to everyone, I think. It's not something that we could have seen coming. You don't know what the claims are going to be. But anyway, I can, make all kinds of excuses, and I won't do that. So this is the overview for the proposed budget. This is kind of that big sheet that I talked about, where this is the summary of all the funds and the proposed budget for next fiscal year. So here's that beginning fund balance that we've talked about. And this sheet will differ from what's in your budget book because I've updated this based on what we received yesterday. Where's my cursor? Here are the two tax revenue account or funds. We get general fund for operating and then the debt services for the bond issues that we've had. So about 62 million total.
You know, you're not sharing your screen, right?
What?
Yeah.
I say, you know, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, it
No, I
says
see
it
it.
is.
Yeah, I see it.
You can see
Wait.
it?
Yeah.
I can
I
see
see
it.
it.
Okay.
I can see it.
Okay,
So
I'm all
William
alone.
can't see it.
I'll figure it out.
If you have your budget book, it's in the end of section 4. There was a question, I think. Did I see a hand that went up?
It's on page 48 and 49.
And the only fund that would have changed is the general fund. So, okay, so you can see here the total revenues, 64.7 million and 68.8 million in expenditures. So obviously we are spending more than we're bringing in there. Part of that, you know, when we pull in, when we look at the numbers that we're using in calculating that, the deficit of 1.4 is coming from these expenses that are circled in purple here. I included debt service and transfers out, which is essentially debt service. Normally you wouldn't consider that part of an operating budget, but they are annual expenses that we have to meet. So I included those in that total. And then our ending fund balance, when we look at that, is down here. It says the 13.7, and that's incredibly low. But if we don't spend our contingency in FY22, that'll bring it back up to about 16.3. And of course, this is all projected. Lots of moving numbers and changing things in the next couple months as well. And so this all brings it to a total budget district-wide of about $90 million. Any questions on this? Okay, I'll move on. Now, most of these graphs are in your packets as well, and definitely in your budget document. This is just a breakdown showing the different proposed revenues and the portion of total that they play. Honestly, EMS right now with the ambulance transport is really doing well, very well. So I think that they're really just rocking it out. And so they're going to be a big portion of that and really helpful in future years as well. Contract income's down a little, you know, and the other things are about where they have been in previous years. So tax is almost 91% of our total revenue. Here's that urban renewal slide that we've come to know and love. Here's that $1.4 million diverted in fiscal year 22 and a cumulative 7-year total of about 8.6 million. We kind of talked about, you know, equivalence of that, what that would mean if we had, and this is just the 1.4 million. In this year, it's approximately a 3-person company operating for 1 year, or 2 new engines, or a week and a half of operations for the whole district. And I'm sure we could come up with, you know, 100 other equivalents as well. But that just kind of gives you an idea of what that would mean to the district. Okay, proposed operating expenses. This is all funds, so you'll see the wildland mitigation in here also, and the debt service, which is under business services division. So at least the PERS bond, that's the only one that's included in this. So we have a total proposed operating budget of just under 64.5. And next we just kind of go into the breakdown of some of those expenses that are in the FY22 budget. Our personnel services is about 56 million. We're still at 293 FTEs this year. We did have some reduction in force, and we did add a couple of positions that are self-funding through either IGAs or cost savings. And this just shows the breakdown. We have done some transfers in between departments too over the past year. So if you're looking at like emergency services and fire chiefs, you can tell those numbers have changed some just with some reorganizations, but the total didn't increase. All right. This is just a look at the PERS. We do have a rate for the next biennium, and it actually didn't go up much at all. You can see the 27.6 is moving forward, and that's actually a decrease in the tier 1, tier 2 rate. The 18.54 is a little bit of an increase in OPSERP general, and the same in OPSERP police and fire. And looking at the jumps, you know, biennium over biennium before that, I think that we're really doing well to have such small increases like this. And I think that's probably attributable to Senate Bill 1049 and the changes that came about with that. So it's good to at least see, you know, some of that actually working for employers as well. Here's our PERS population change at the district. We're at about 27% tier 1, tier 2, 63% are OPSERP fire, and 10% are OPSERP general service. We've had just in this fiscal year, which wouldn't be reflected in here yet, several tier 1, tier 2 retirements. So I think that if you look at the same graph next year, you'll probably see more of a dip in that. All right. Materials and services is one of the other areas of expense, of course. This is an area that we've taken a really hard look at in this proposed budget, and we've really done a lot of paring down, a lot of hard conversations, trying to really get that deficit spending down. The only increases are a couple of smaller ones in professional services and training expense. Meanwhile, we've reduced about almost $1.3 million out of the materials and services line items, including some of that is attributable to the Estacada fire operating costs being removed. And also we just little increase or little reductions in reviews added up to about $515,000. And then, you know, the facilities maintenance, EMS supply, we've reduced. Dispatch services, we were able to reduce because there was actually a project budgeted in the current year under dispatch services that isn't going to happen after all. So we were able to take that budget out. And then also uniform and PPE. So all of that totals a 12% decrease in materials and services. Capital outlay, here's the list. These are all in Fund 20 or 30. So here's the list of items that we're planning to purchase this upcoming year. Most of it's in equipment. There's some replacement schedules, and that just basically, you know, replaces equipment that has ended its useful life. So that's
Christina,
yeah.
Can I just dive in real quickly?
Sure.
Just because we're talking about innovative strategies, we need a new brush truck. Fleet also needs a flatbed replacement. So what we did is we partnered and got creative, getting this flatbed replacement that also is capable to put in a slip-in water tank, so that when it's needed during the wildfire season, it can be grabbed and taken and respond to emergencies. So that's just a small piece of what we are doing as we're moving forward at trying to get creative with how we better serve fleet as well as emergency response. So thank you.
Any questions on anything on this list? Okay, we're moving right along. Contingency each year is set at 2.5% of the operating budget as a general contingency, which would be the 1,587,718. And then we also have the restricted contingency of $1 million each year, and that's intended for things like wildfires or, you know, COVID and those kinds of costs. So a total contingency budget of 2,587,718, and all of that is contained within the general fund. All right. Long range forecast. So this is kind of the 5-year outlook at what where we think things are, where I think things are going to be if we continue, you know, on the current trends and the current path. This, you know, is obviously not going to end up this way because things change so much during the year. So this is really just to give you an estimate so that you can see which direction, you know, the district is headed and can make changes and corrections before, you know, it becomes a problem.
Christina, would you touch on the fact that why you're seeing difference in ending fund balance and beginning fund balance from the other slides that we showed?
Yeah, so this one, and I just brought up the highlight here, is it combines funds 10, 20, and 30. And I think in the past, we have just shown Fund 10, the general fund. I wanted to, and we kind of started doing this last year, since we moved the capital outlay budgets out into Fund 20 and 30, I thought it was, you know, a better picture of our whole available budget to show all 3 of these funds on the long range forecast. So that's why you're going to see some numbers that are a little different here than on, like if you were to look at the general fund column on the all funds summary, it's going to be a little bit different. For one, that will say 0 for capital outlay, and this one shows the capital outlay that's included in Fund 20 and 30. And then the revenues will be a little bit different as well, and of course the beginning fund balance. So these numbers are a little bit different, but it's just because they combine those 3 funds. I wanted to show kind of all of the money available for use.
And one thing to add here, and it's also important to remember that 1.4 of that is the loan that we've taken out. 1.6 of that is the close down of the urban renewal at the town center. But the problem with that $1.6 million is we don't have freedom to spend it. It has to be allocated to either Station 1 or Station 5, has to be allocated in that town center area. And so though it shows that we have the $1.6 million there, being able to allocate it appropriately is creating some of an issue. So what we've done is we've reached back out to the county and worked on collaboration to try to shift that to another urban renewal area that is in the fire district, so that we can actually utilize those funds. And then hopefully money that we're allocating towards capital projects can be used back towards the general fund, and we can use that $1.6 million. And we're getting a lot of progress moving forward with the county. And Chief Whiteley and myself have a meeting in the next couple of weeks to hopefully solidify that, because that would be a huge thing for us moving forward, is to get that 1.6 to be able to be realized and utilized in our budget.
One thing to point out here, this 1.8 revenue short of expenses, we've been saying 1.4 in past slides. So basically the special funds 20 and 30 are spending down fund balance of about $400,000, a little more than that, which they're supposed to be doing essentially, at least in Fund 30. You know, we're using the money that is part of the loan in order to fund some of the capital outlay this year, but it's not going to be replenished. So it shows as a spend down. But that's an intentional spend down. So it's a little bit different. It's not the same deficit spending situation as the general fund. Just wanted to point that out. The other thing I wanted to point out, if you notice on the assumptions, oops, I'm sorry, down here at the bottom, annual cost of living increases 0% for FY22. So currently we're in labor negotiations. There are no cost of living increases or basically benefit increases included in this proposed budget at this time. And it's also the next 2 years, I've zeroed that out as well. You know, so there's definitely that to consider when you look at how realistic this is going to be. It will change, I can guarantee that. But like I said, this is just intended to give you kind of a high level view of a general direction.
Yeah. Make recruitment a little difficult too. So I was curious about the chief talking about a loan that we took out. Which loan was that?
So in 2018, when we were finishing up the capital bond projects, we found that we the costs had come in higher than we had anticipated. So we secured a loan from a direct loan from Key Bank for about $7 million. And quite a bit of that went to pay to finish up those bond projects that we promised the taxpayers. And then we've used the rest of it for kind of different capital projects. Maybe one of the chiefs could speak better to that.
Yeah, the last piece to that is actually one of the things that we promised the public was the training center. We weren't able to build a robust training center like we wanted, but it is repaving the surfaces, upkeeping the buildings, building bigger props, better props. That's what that money's been allocated towards recently. We also have in the docket for next year, the front wall of Station 14 is falling off. And so some of that money is going to be going towards doing that.
When do we project getting that loan paid off?
It's supposed to get paid off. It was a 10-year, so 2028, right, Christina?
It is actually in.
We're trending quicker than that.
I think it's 32 or, oh, let me see here. I've got the debt service schedule in the budget document. And it looks like that one is 2035. So that loan, it's the last one to be paid off. Basically, everything else will be paid off in 2032, and then we'll still be making a few payments on the series 2018. But with that one, it was amortized over 15 years, I believe, 2018 to 2034 anyway. So there is still a capital balance at the end of that loan.
Have we looked at refinancing that with today's rates?
I don't remember what the rate was that we paid. I know it's pretty low, but that's certainly something that could be looked at. Yeah.
I'll bet it's lower now.
Yeah, William, that's when I was talking about that Monday conversation with muni bonds, and that was part of that topic on Monday, was looking at that piece. But again, we're going to wait till the CFO comes in here in June. Okay. and then move forward with that.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So in 2035, there's still a $3.25 million balance. And that's when the amortization ends. So you'll need to figure out either how to pay that off at that point or refinance it or something. Because at the way it is currently structured, it doesn't amortize out the full amount of the principal. So something to keep in the back of your mind. Or
I don't remember talking about this last year.
What's that?
I don't remember talking about this last year.
It's been budgeted in Fund 30 for Yeah, because we got that in June of 2018, I believe.
Okay, that's fine.
It would have been a couple fiscal years, but let's see. Any other questions on this slide?
I
Yes.
do on the, let me see if I understand this. You have step increases, but not cost of living.
Right.
Are the step increases continuation of existing contract language? And is there a expectation that the current contracts, or has it ended, or will it end?
You mind if I hit this one, Christina?
Oh, no, please.
And then Chief Whiteley, feel free to chime in, Doug or Brian. We're in the middle of the negotiations. The contract expires July 1st. The local understands completely where we're at and is collaboratively working together to figure out a long-term strategy moving forward. The step increases are not, well, they're contractual, but they're not based on this working agreement for these 3 years. So as a brand new firefighter comes in, there's certain, after a year, you get this step increase. After 3 years, you get so on and so forth, up to 5 years, 5 steps. And so that is not what we're talking about. It's anything above that as far as cost of living. The step increases, I don't exactly know the exact percentage of individuals that will be getting a step increase next year. A lot of our people are maxed out as far as step increases.
Yeah, Chief, the only thing I'll add to that, and that's spot on, is in that 3% is generally a running average, what we see as over the years, the number of employees that will receive contractual step increases. You also have that at other ranks when there's a step 1 and a step 2, whether it's an apparatus operator, lieutenant, captain, battalion chief. You will note there in the out years that drops to 2%, and that's based on the assumption as we look to see that attrition start to slow down a little bit that we noticed over the last 5 to 7 years. And we'll start to see in a majority of our staff reaching the higher end of those step increases, so that they'll be paid at obviously a higher rate, which is reflected above in personnel services, but the built-in increase due to that will likely be less in those years.
Charles, was that question answered for you? Okay.
All right, any other questions on this one? Okay, then the next one is over to Chief Brown again. Talk about.
All right, thank you so much. So longer term challenges, and then I'm going to talk about one success here that could be a longer term challenge, but is also a short term potential for us as an organization. But I'll close with that. So replacement of our community fire stations. We have aging infrastructure. As we currently look at downtown Oregon City, Station 15, nostalgic, love the station. I was a captain out of that station. My heart's there, but the building is getting extremely old, and the cost of keeping it up, we're outweighing the juice being worth the squeeze, so to speak. And so we've got multiple stations that are like that are reaching ages to where we need to start really looking at building new fire stations. And so we have some major facility improvements. The wall off of Station 14 coming off. We have a dry rot at Station 6. We have a lot of our capital is getting that wear and tear that has been deferred over the last few years. And gotten to the point where we can't defer it. We have to handle it. Director Valance has been trying to get a lot of these projects going in the upkeep, and it's just been getting deferred, and we're past that. Like, we need to start approaching these problems. Advancement in technology. The fire service is growing and is becoming more innovative and relying heavily on technology. And as we dive into the technological driven society and world and fire service, it costs a lot of money. So that's a challenge as we start looking forward and picking which technology we're going to utilize that's going to be most efficient for our firefighters and our staff, but yet being fiscally conservative to where we're getting the taxpayers' dollar to stretch as much as we can. Dispatch services, like any other industry, as personnel costs increase, so did the dispatch services increase. So we're seeing rising dispatch services. Though CCOM does a phenomenal job, that's a challenge as we get moving forward, and CCSO and ourselves are the biggest users of that service. The impacts of revenue due to COVID-19, that's yet to be seen. Now, as William spoke to earlier about, God forbid, and we hope this doesn't happen, but foreclosures, but that takes time before foreclosures kick in. And so in that time, are we collecting that revenue? Likely not. And so we don't know what this economy is, what our micro economy is going to do locally. As you look at the cost of homes currently in Clackamas County, they're skyrocketing, they're increasing. So are we seeing an influx of Portland coming into is that urban sprawl starting to begin? Are we having that influx from California, Washington, other places? Or are we seeing a brief glimpse of a spike in the area because of some urban sprawl, and then the impacts of COVID are going to hit, and all the money that's getting pumped into the economies, is that going to start to cause inflation, and we're going to start having some issues? So we don't know the impacts of COVID-19 yet. We're genuinely concerned about what our businesses and our local economy is going to do, and so we're watching this very carefully and trying to take a conservative approach with that potential, but also being aware enough to understand that we're in a microenvironment that we could very well see a spike in growth and some great things happen. So we're watching in that line and seeing what's going to come. Professional development. William, as you were on the fire chiefs panel process, this is a big one for us and our organization is professional development. And what's not on here also is our diversity, equity, and equality. And these things are a challenge, but it's a great challenge for our organization. It's opportunities. So I don't want us to look at challenges as always necessarily being bad. These are great opportunities for us as we start moving forward to getting creative and innovative with how we attack professional development and how we approach a more diverse workforce that mirrors the residents of our county. The last piece that I'd like to speak to this, which kind of ties into this diversity and equity and equality, is an opportunity that we've received from WorkSource, a WorkSource grant with Crew 30. So the wildfires, after the wildfires, we got together and we started scratching how can we be better prepared for the next time. And Chief Olson, Brent Olson, came up with this concept of a fuel mitigation crew, and worked really hard and partnered up with Clackamas Community College, and we received a grant for fuels mitigation crew, which creates a great opportunity for us moving forward as potentially one of those avenues to where we can start having a diverse workforce, because it's an avenue for people to make money and yet get an introduction to providing for the citizens and getting out into the communities, and then also potentially open up an avenue to become into the fire service career. So as we are watching that, it's a challenge because we want this program to succeed, but it's also an opportunity for a lot of cool things in the future as far as some additional revenue that we weren't anticipating before, and also a gateway for creating a path for an additional path other than what we already currently have with our volunteer program, which is phenomenal for diversity, equity, and equality. As Chief Dieters, he's on here, he'll speak to, this is the most diverse volunteer academy that we've had in his whole entire career of running those academies. So we're creating new ways and looking at ways to to mitigate the challenges that we face and the opportunities that we face as an organization. And it's going to take some time. It's going to take some creativity. It's going to take teamwork, and it's going to take partnerships with the community and the fire district. And these are all opportunities for us to move forward as one and start kicking butt together. And so, sorry for the slang. That just happens. It happens sometimes. Marilyn is looking at me. She's like, I'm going to talk to you, Nick. She's got, I'm going to get a talking to for that one. So, so as we're looking at some of these longer term challenges as well as opportunities, we've got to hike our pants up here. We got to tighten up our belts. We got to rewire how we think. We got to get creative. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this together. And I'm grateful that you guys have listened to us talk as much as we have, and we've thrown a lot of information today. I can't thank you enough. And as a fire chief for Clackamas Fire, and speaking for the whole entire Clackamas Fire family and team, we can't thank you enough for your willingness to buy in and help us as we start moving forward as an organization. And so I'll stop right there with the long-term challenges, Christina, and put it on and turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. So we have time for discussion and any questions that you may have already come up with. I did want to just go over the next steps for this. Obviously, you did just get your budget books today, so you'll have the opportunity to review the books and everything. If you do have questions after the end of this meeting, you're welcome to bring them up at this meeting, but if you have them after the meeting, please send them in by May 19th or 18th, I'm sorry, so that we have a chance to get answers to those for the meeting on the 19th. It'll just be more productive for everybody. Also, next meeting, we'll present the updates on any budget projection changes that we've seen come about, especially now with these new numbers for fiscal year 21 year-end estimates. So we'll be sure and present both of those at the meeting on the 19th. And of course, we have the 3 meetings scheduled. So we will be asking at the May 19th or the 27th meeting for approval of the proposed budget, approval of the permanent tax rate again, and approval of the levy for bonded debt of $2,059,409. So with that, I think I can open it up for any questions anybody has.
Yeah, I have a question, Christina.
Okay.
Will you be emailing to us your updated figures rather than just presenting them on a format such as this? Because it really is not helpful to me to have numbers sprung on me at the last minute.
Yes, I would be happy to email out the presentation that was finished at about 5 o'clock this evening and with those numbers, and then you will have those as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay?
Yeah, I'm going to make a couple of comments and ask a question or two as well, but I don't expect answers to those questions tonight, but I will expect answers to the questions at some point before we approve or not approve what's going on with the budget.
Before you proceed, can I get the screen sharing to stop so I can see everybody? Since we're in a discussion, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Charles. So I got to be honest, I'm not a big fan of passing a budget where we're deficit spending, but I understand why. And I understand that's something that we may end up having to do. That being said, if we have to do it, I'm definitely not going to be a big fan of doing it twice if we have to do it the 22 and 23 years as well. So I know that, Chief Brown, you just got handed this, and there was a lot of challenges here, and I understand all of that. I'm still not a big fan of passing a deficit spending budget, but even though we probably will. That being said, I also want to know what it looks like if we pass if we streamline the budget to where we're not doing a deficit spending budget, both this year and next year. I know that means service delivery cuts, but I think we owe it to our people. We owe it to the budget committee, and we owe it to the taxpayers of seeing what does the fire district look like if we pass a balanced budget or a budget where we're not deficit spending. Certainly for next year, but possibly this year also. And then also the other part of this question I have in myself is, okay, if we do make it through this year, the 21-22 year, then what does 22-23 look like? Are we going to be able to, are we going to have to do this, play the same song and dance all over again with deficit spending versus cutting services? I know we can't, it's hard to project out past much more than 2 to 3 years, but I want to see it. I want to know what it looks like. I want to know what the service delivery of the fire district looks like if we choose to, if we don't have the money to make it to the end of the budget year. And so, anyway, that's kind of where I'm at on that. Like I said, I don't expect any discussion or answers to it tonight, but I would like to have that discussion next time. So,
okay, there's a four phase plan. So, but that's likely a 30 to 40 minute conversation. So, I don't see us getting past phase 1, which is what I'm presenting to you today. You guys have hired me to do a job. I'm surrounded by a phenomenal team, and we are going to tighten up our belts and get to work. So I appreciate that question. That's we will have a small presentation on what that looks like at next budget meeting. Unless you want me to get into the weeds with phase 1, 2, 3, 4, because I'll just give you the 30,000 foot.
That would be fine. I think that's appropriate. I think it's appropriate to see that, because I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is. If we have to go for a non-deficit spending type budget, it's going to be service. It's going to be services, and I think people need to hear that. They need to see that we're talking. If we don't pass a budget where we're going into some deficit spending, we're talking about cutting services, so significant services. But I think we need to see it. So,
were there other people that had questions that they wanted to discuss? So I'll throw one out. It seems the unexpected expenditures in this case came from an unprecedented healthcare expenditures that would be not necessarily something that would be repeated in future budgets. So those would be one-time expenditures. And it sounds like you're still addressing those. Are there resources or methods that we might be in the works, and I know you're waiting for the CFO to come on board, that could help ameliorate those one-time costs?
Yeah, so the unfortunate thing is in 2010, they had a plan to save for a spike year, and it was repeatedly asked to do. And so our hope is that we don't have a spike year, okay? This next year, that's what this year for medical insurance truly was, and that we can start to tuck away into the contingency, a contingency for the next spike year that potentially could be in 4, 5, 2, 3 years. If you're not prepared, then you're failing, and I don't think we like to fail. So that is our strategy moving forward, is to prepare for this situation should it happen again. As you break down medical costs, this self-funded direction has saved the fire district millions of dollars just from the trajectory that we were going. And so this is there's a good solid foundation to these medical benefits. It's just being prepared for these situations and doing it together. And quite honest, this is a situation to where we weren't prepared for. So we're going to be prepared.
Chief, how are you defining a spike year?
So a spike year, this is, and I'm using terminology from the consultant, is that a spike year is they anticipate based on averages that every 6 to 7 years you have your standard, which is about 80% of what's budgeted based on what they see, the consultant sees for medical expenses. And we typically trend in, they typically want you to budget at the 100%, and knowing that it typically comes in at the 80%. And so the 100% is that spike year. So does that make sense? So it's that unanticipated family member that has a catastrophic event. We just have happened to have quite a few of them this year, but that's what a spike year is defined.
It's an unusual event. It's difficult that you can say that's unexpected if we are expecting it. I mean, we are expecting to eventually have another spike year. Yeah. We are anticipating this for next year, right? Budget wise, but yes, you're correct. I think, especially in the service that we have, we know that there's trauma that happens on a daily basis. You can't go through life without it. And so, inevitably we will have another one of these years. I just hope for the sake of our people that it's spread out a little bit longer from what we're facing right now. I hope I answered that question for you, William. That's close enough. It's as close as you can get, really. It's an oxymoron.
It is.
Say that you're planning for a spike.
It is.
It's somehow inevitable, but we just have to expect that it's going to happen eventually.
Yes, sir.
Is there any other general discussion or questions at this time? All right, I don't see any. We have public comment on here, and I'm not sure how the public can participate, or we'll have to discuss that. If there's members of the public present that want to share their observations, they raise their hand. I think I recognize everybody's name.
Yes, and I apologize, Charles, Mr. Gallia, that I did not put that on the redlined agenda that I sent out. But what we typically do at the board meetings is if someone is attending from the public and has a comment, they can raise their hand, and then we can allow them to speak and have a chance to ask their question or state their comment. Also, we did put in the notice that if folks had a public comment or question, they could submit to me prior to the meeting to let me know so. So I didn't receive anything prior to the meeting, but again, if someone's on the call or on the meeting this evening, you could allow the opportunity for a raised hand if you choose.
Okay. And I don't see any.
And that's located on the bottom of your screen if you're tuning in.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that we have 2 meetings scheduled. The next one is the 19th at 6 p.m. and following, if need be, the one on May 27th also at 6 p.m. Is there any other business we'd like to bring up for the good of the order? Okay, then we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And without objection, I'll consider the meeting adjourned.
And it's before 8 o'clock.
Bada bim, bada boom.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
job.
everyone.
Right,
Good
thank
job,
you.
everybody.
Nice job, everybody.
See you next time.
See ya.